Let's welcome to the show today's huge guest, the one and only Coach Jonathan Coachman. Coach, how are you, sir?
Man, I'm great. I apologize. It's taken us a few months to get this done, but I'm glad we're here today, and we're getting it done at the end of 24, heading into 25. So I'm excited, man. It's good to see you.
You too, sir. We're getting it done. Today's part one of a six-part series you and I are doing. No.
And I'll see you in July. Good to see
Yes.
everybody.
Awesome. Coach, let me ask you this. How did you even get on the WWE's radar to start working for them?
Oh, all those years ago. It's funny because, and I kind of use my story to maybe try to inspire others because I always had this very clear image of what I wanted my career to look like. I've been a sports fanatic my entire life since I was a little tiny kid. I did like wrestling, but I grew up in a part of the country in Kansas that we only had three channels. We didn't even have wrestling. WrestleMania 1, I couldn't figure out why the Channel 3 News wasn't showing me highlights of Hogan and Mr. T. So we had to read books back in the day. So fast forward, and I was very young, 22, 23. I was in my second local TV job in Kansas City, and I thought I was going to be there forever. In my mind, I was like, if I can't get to ESPN, then I want to be that local broadcaster who is there for 40 years and everybody's beloved. And when you show up at Chiefs games or Royals games, that they're like, hey, coach, that's who I wanted to be. Right. That lasted about a month because in May of 1999, we were preparing for, I believe it was what was the pay-per-view? Over the Top, Over the Edge. Can't remember the name. Over the Edge. And so my station, I talked them into sending me to Florida to do it's funny you say 6-part series. We did a 3-part series on why the WWE at the time was really starting to get red hot. And that's when The Rock was big and Stone Cold was starting to get really big too. And that was May of 1999. And that night, it changed my career trajectory forever. Because what happened was it was a Sunday night, and I did the third part. I did a live shot from Kemp Arena, which I just drove by a few days ago. I was back home in Kansas, and I looked at the arena, and like all of these emotions started flooding back because that was now 25 years ago, and we did the live shot, and then the WWF at the time, they hadn't even been WWE yet. They gave me a couple of tickets, so a good buddy of mine came up from Wichita. He's a huge wrestling fan, and I remember giving my briefcase to my photographer. He took it back to the station, which is maybe 5-10 minutes away. And so I went in and watched the show, and I was in the 7th row. And about halfway through the show, any OG wrestling fan knows what happened that night. And the lights go down. The Godfather's doing an interview up on the screen, and thank goodness kind of what Vince's. Whenever there was an interview on the big screen, they would shut all the lights off, so your focus was there and not looking around. Thank goodness that happened, because out of nowhere you just hear this wham, and you could feel the impact of the ring. And like I said, it happened in the corner that I was at, maybe 20 feet away from where I was standing. And that's when, of course, Owen Hart fell from the Raptors and died on impact. And the next several minutes were very crazy. They wheeled him out. They were literally straddling him. Nobody's ever seen the video of this because they've never released it. And this was, cell phones at the time weren't really a thing. And my station, again, I think of all these details, and I'm like, if that wouldn't have happened, this wouldn't have happened. They didn't even think that sports guys were important enough to have a beeper, let alone a cell phone. People are like, what's a beeper? Well, it's this thing you put on your head, and they call you, and then you call them back. So we didn't know what had happened. We thought, hey, it's a part of the show. That match isn't going to happen, and he wheeled out. So I happened to go back to the station to get my briefcase. And that decision changed my career forever. Because I walked into the station, it's about 9:30 local time, and the place is going bananas. And I walked all the way back to the sports office, and I find out then, I said, I think something may have happened tonight. And I remember, and I quote, my producer said, you fucking think so? A man died tonight. And like hit me like a ton of bricks. So the next 12 hours were a blur. I stayed up all night. I almost got fired by my news director because I wasn't a reporter, because I was the only reporter in the building. I was the only one. And in his mind, we could have had that story to ourselves. I'm like, oh, the guy died. But so after being on Good Morning America, fast forward 3 months, and I was very fair. I said the show should not have continued, but I understood, because back then pay-per-view was a big deal. It wasn't like today
Right.
where, Peacock pays them $200 million and they get everything. You had to sell, sell, sell. So Vince would have lost millions and millions of dollars if he would have cut the shows short and then give everybody their money back. So they brought Shawn Michaels to the station to try and sell, because most people don't know that the very first SmackDown show was in Kansas City 3 months after that happened. And they couldn't sell any tickets. Like, nobody wanted to go back into that arena to watch a wrestling show. So they sent a big time SVP instead of a normal, young kid. Normally they'll send somebody to get sandwiches or whatever. And so he liked me and thought I was really smart, thought I asked good questions. He said, hey, we're looking for a new person. Let me go back and talk to Vince and Kevin Dunn at the time. And that's essentially how I got on their radar. And then I went out for the interview. They offered me the job on the spot. And I thought I was going to work 2 jobs for the next 2.5 years in my mind. And because Kansas City wasn't going to let me out of my contract. I didn't have any what we call outs. And normally an out is, you can leave if it's a top 10 market or whatever. So I got hired, and by the grace of God, I guess, my station in Kansas City, Channel 9, was trying to buy a helicopter. They didn't have the funds to do so. And so WWE wrote a big check, bought me out of my contract. They put a down payment on a helicopter, and I guess the rest is history.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's
true,
not
all true. All true.
That's not the answer I expected the night Owen Hart passed away.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I had to stay in Kansas City because this happened in August. And in a lot of local markets that have an NFL team, they have one guy that's committed to being the team guy and traveling to the weight. Well, the season was starting. They didn't have time to replace me. So my news director said, I need you to stay. So I had something that very few people get. I had a 4-month runway to learn the business and learn what happens backstage. I was not allowed on the air until I was done in Kansas City. So I went to Raw and SmackDown every single week on Mondays and Tuesdays, my off days. I would fly back home on Wednesday and go straight into the station. I would work Wednesday through Sunday, and then I'd be right back out to Monday Night Raw on Monday. So I got to learn from September all the way to January before I did my first on-air thing, which was with The Rock, January 8th, 2000 in Chicago, Illinois.
Who'd he ever beat, right?
True.
What was it like work with The Rock?
Man, he was great. I tell people all the time that he is probably the biggest influence when it comes to my style. And a lot of things that young broadcasters or young entertainers, or I watch wrestlers today and I'm like, man, if you were smart enough to realize that you need so much help, and I've offered to the WWE, I've offered to ESPN to be a talent coach to help people learn how to speak, because I have a saying on my show, Behind the Turnbuckle. I say, if you can't talk, you can't get over. And so many wrestlers over the years were great in-ring performers. They're great if you need to fill out a house show and have 10 matches on a Sunday afternoon. But if you want to get TV time on Raw or TV time on SmackDown, you got to be able to talk. I mean, we're recording this the night after CM Punk and Seth Rollins delivered one of the greatest promo segments with no physicality in the history, in my opinion, of the business. And if you can't do that, that's the standard. What we saw last night was the standard. And The Rock used to be the standard. And everything from timing, pausing. He was the only superstar. People don't know this either. SmackDown was taped on Tuesday. It didn't air till Thursday when it first started. They had to edit it and add in sound, and they added in we call it sweetening in the business. They sweetened it way too much. But The Rock was the only guy that got to do his stuff live backstage because he needed that interaction from the crowd, because he developed so many catchphrases. Everything I do on my brands, on my shows, I don't like to use the word podcast, because podcast to me, in my mind, has a negative connotation. Because podcasts, you show up when you want, you record when you want, you talk when you want, but there is no, I run brands, I run shows, and he taught me that everything has to be branded. Everything on my shows is branded. Everything. The picks, educate and entertain, whatever it is. Why? You can sell it, because Rock, if he's not making money at something, he ain't doing it. And then also it allows you to have the crowd know what's coming, and they know what's going to be, and you can tease forward. If you just say, hey, coming up in 20 minutes, blah, blah, blah. But if coming up in 20 minutes, you're going to hear this, this, and this, then it really starts to set the stage. So he was really the biggest influence in my career as far as a talent is concerned. And I'm forever grateful for that.
Who's your direct boss? I mean, I know you report to Vince, but
Yeah.
Kevin Dunn?
Kevin Dunn was my direct boss. He's the one that hired me on the spot. I don't have a lot of good things to say about him at this point in my life. I've let a lot of things go. I was incredibly loyal to him and to Vince. A lot of people know that. But looking back now that I'm a little bit older and I've done a lot of things and spent a lot of time at ESPN, I will say this. He is the most talented producer, hands down, that I've ever been around. Very few human beings can put together a WrestleMania. If a young kid out there who wants to produce thinks that they know what it takes to do a big show, watch WrestleMania, because that will separate the men from the boys, so to speak. And every WrestleMania that I was there for, and I've been a part of 16 WrestleManias, and Kevin Dunn was the man sitting in the seat. And the other part of this that I'm learning not to do with my own brands is they were so paranoid. They would never tell you this. So paranoid about somebody else coming and taking their spot. He was sitting in the seat producing probably for 20 years past when he should have been. He should have been this executive producer and have somebody else teaching them. So then when he left, less than a year ago, now you're starting to say who's going to be the guy, who can be the guy, because he loved that control. He loved instilling fear in a lot of people that work for him. He was supportive of me, and he gave me a lot of great opportunities. But there were times where he made me the scapegoat and other people the scapegoat. So I don't think anybody was crying tears when Kevin Dunn left the WWE a year ago. But I'll be grateful that he hired me, and I enjoyed my time. I don't want to act like I didn't, but there was a lot of things I wish would have done or gone differently.
Coach, when they offer you the job, nothing to do with being in the ring. It was just a backstage interviewer.
I mean, I had no experience in the ring, and so it was. And back then, we had a lot of studio shows. We had shows like Metal, Jacked. When I walked in the door, Michael Cole, I'll give him a lot of credit, even though I would never want his life or his job within that life, because unless I'm mistaken, and I don't know this to be fact, but he started in 1996 and he became the voice of SmackDown. I don't believe that he has missed a show since 1996. And there's a show every single week. Eventually, they let him move to Texas with his family, but he lived in New Jersey before then. But when I walked in the door, he literally was standing there the first day and said, "Here you go." And he handed me 6 to 8 shows. So I got really good, really, really fast, because we would come back from TV on Wednesdays and we were right into the studio recording. You know, we used to do a lot of, they do 3 or 4 matches before Raw, then 3 or 4 matches for Sunday Night Heat before SmackDown. And so he handed me all those. And he's like, "I'm just doing SmackDown." And that was fun. He had put in 3 or 4 years of being the only on-air talent pretty much to do those shows. So Kevin Dunn, I will say this, that when you're in that environment, he kind of leaves you alone. He's upstairs. He's worrying about all the packages that were being done for the pay-per-views. Because remember, at the time, as I said, the pay-per-views were everything. So he was the decision maker for everything production at WWE. That could be a good thing if you're brilliant, which he is, but it can be a bad thing because there's nobody there strong enough to tell him when it's wrong, tell him when he's not treating people well. And I would never want to be in an environment like that to where somebody couldn't tell me, "Hey, you're being too tough on this person," or, "Hey, you need to be a little bit tougher on that person." It was a very dictatorship type of life within those walls. But at the time, when the company's growing like that and it's all good and you're 23 years old and you're partying your ass off all over the world, the last thing anybody wants to hear is about you complaining to some guy's a little bit tough on you. And it wasn't even tough on me. Just I'm saying the lifestyle and the vibe within the WWE studios.
Right. What was your first impression of Vince? Not later on, like when you were like day one coach walking in.
I met Vince on his birthday, August 24th, 1999. I started the day after Lillian Garcia. I started, I believe, the same day as Trish Stratus. And Vince is a bigger than life personality. That can be good, but also now I think he's paying the price for that. And he's when he walks in the room, he's in the room. There are very few human beings built like that have that aura. And to have that aura, you've got to be scared of nothing, be scared of no one, be willing to put it all on the line every single time you need to. And those are the good traits of Vince McMahon. But what the bad traits are is it's very hard to have friendships. We used to joke all the time that Vince only answered to two people, God and the tax man. And the tax man is kind of, you know what I mean? And that was our joke. But in all sincerity, if I didn't have a buddy that I could call on a Saturday afternoon or a Sunday afternoon and said, hey, the game's on, you want to come over and have a beer? To me, that's a sad state of affairs. So when you go through something like he's gone through the last couple of years, which he brought on himself, you don't have anybody that's going to be there to pick you up. You're going to have anybody that say, hey, man, I know you're going through it. Why don't you come over and have a beer and we can talk it out? Because life is not easy for any of us. We all go through struggles. We all have big bumps along the way, and it's how you get up from them, but it's also having people help you get up. So I don't think, when you become a multi-billionaire like he is now after the sale, nobody is going to feel sorry for you, and nobody wants to be your friend either. So I was way too loyal to Vince McMahon. I did a lot of things that he asked me to do, nothing illegal, but a lot of things that I should have said, no, I'm going to be with my family. Or, the time that I was in the mall in Salina, Kansas, which I was just in a week ago. It's 3 hours from Kansas City. It's in the middle of nowhere where my parents live. I get a call from Kevin Dunn. Hey, we need you back here tomorrow. It's Christmas Eve. I know Vince needs you to shoot something with him in the tower, but then you don't have to go to Raw on Monday. I said, so I'm going to be sitting in my house on Monday by myself, but I got to give up Christmas Eve. So I stayed in a hotel in Kansas at the Kansas City airport on Christmas Eve to fly back Christmas morning to film something, so then he could fly on his private jet down to Florida to spend Christmas evening with his family. And those are the type of things that I wish I would have said no to.
Is there saying no to Vince?
Not while I was there, because you got to remember, this is one of one. WCW was in business when I got there, but they were done by 2000, 2001, whatever that was. So there was only one game in town. And when I say one game, it's to make a living that you don't have to do something else, a six-figure living. And so if you're getting paid, let's say $500,000, you know that in the wrestling business, there's nowhere else you're going to go to make $500,000. And to be honest, you even make $100,000. And then you got to go to the independent circuit, and you might make a lot because you had a name in the WWE. But what happens is you got to grind it out, and you got to show up. And you got to work on commission, so to speak, every single weekend. And if you take off a weekend, guess what? You don't get paid. So there was no saying no, because those roles and those jobs were so hard to come by. And when you got to that level and the company was so red hot, I never said no to him except for once, and I got beat up for it. So there you go.
Figuratively, literally?
No, literally. 2005, we were doing tribute to the troops in overseas for a few years after 9/11. They could only take 30 people. Very limited, 18 talent, 12, cameramen, things of that nature. So everybody had a background check, et cetera, et cetera. And it was supposed to be optional because we're going to a war zone. And so that particular year, I said, yes, I went. I ended up wrestling Ric Flair in the middle of the desert. It was very cool. The next year, I get married. And then the next year, my wife at the time was pregnant with our daughter, who's now 16. And so this is December before my daughter's born in June. So my wife's about 3 months pregnant. And she was like, I don't want to go through the anxiety of knowing you're going to be in a war zone. So I would prefer if you didn't go. Very, very fair. Very fair.
Sure. Of course.
And so I told them, hey, I'm not going. And because I had never said no to them, they thought I was joking. Literally, we showed up that morning. We would have a guy out back. He would take your bags. They would have to go. So by the time you got onto the plane that night, all your bags had been, with the dogs and the scan and all that stuff. So they're waiting. They're like, where are your bags? They said, I told you I was not going. We thought you were kidding. You never said no. I said, at what point did you think that this face was kidding about going to Afghanistan? So they didn't like that very much. And I didn't go. And so they had to scramble because you had a spot open. So I believe it was Chris Masters that ended up taking my spot on last minute notice. The following week, I'm out of commentary, and Undertaker ended the show, and Earl Hebner, one of the referees, came over. A lot of it's very, I'll be honest, a lot of it's very hazy because it was, over 17 years ago. But I knew, he goes, go attack the Undertaker. I knew what was going on. And it was Vince's way of punishing me, which was complete bullshit. Because at that point, we're now talking 7 years of blind loyalty. And so I went and I hit the Undertaker, which made no sense whatsoever. But we were off the air, and you always wanted to send the crowd home happy. And I was kind of a heel at that time. And so I knew, okay, he's going to be able to stand behind the, wait a second, I was trying to let them go home happy. When the truth of the matter was that he was just angry and wanted to make me pay. And Undertaker even apologized to me as he was beating me up. Because a lot of the guys are really good about, you talk in the ring, you get really good at talking out of the side of your mouth. So I took it, and I took a couple other finishes from other guys. But that was the moment that I knew I can't be here anymore if this is what's going to happen after I have children or after I have a family. And then I'd also seen what the wrestling business had done to other families. The divorce rate is very, very high. And so that was kind of the moment that I decided I need to have an exit strategy. So that's when I started, chasing after sports jobs. And so I had a couple of gigs in 2007 and 2008 before I left MSG Network, doing some small college basketball stuff. And that led to ESPN ultimately.
It's like you've already been to high school. Why go through it again, right?
100%. It was bullshit. And you'll, if you watch the documentary that was on Netflix, some of the guys will talk about it. Some of the guys will acknowledge it. But if they were in a safe space and they were in a space where there was no repercussions, even in their minds, because they still, even though Vince is gone, there's still a lot of them like, wait a second, if I say anything, I may get kicked out of the wrestling business. I may be blackballed. And there's a lot of them that aren't like me. I had the ability, thank goodness, to go somewhere else and do real sports. There's only a few of us. Rock, Jericho has done a lot of stuff. Myself, Cena. And I'm not saying I'm on their level. What I'm saying is there was other things at a high level that I was able to do. If you have certain guys, look at Ric Flair, for example. He's still out there doing stuff at 78, 79 years old. Is Ric Flair going to go to a bank and say, hey, I want to work here 9 to 5? Of course not. You can't do that. And so there's some guys that need the wrestling business forever. Thank God. I'm still in the wrestling business. I talk about it because I'm an expert in it. Anybody that says I'm not doesn't know anything about being in the wrestling business. I spent almost 13 years in the WWE at the highest level. And so that's why I'm not real big fans of wrestling fans. I don't need their respect. And a lot of us will say the exact same thing. But any of us that spend any amount of time and traveling up and down the roads 52 weeks a year for a decade or more, you would like the respect of at least listening to our point of view, because we've been there. I've been in the meetings. I've been in all of the meetings with the agents. And I didn't see any dirt sheet writers in those meetings. I didn't see any dirt sheet writers backstage to even be able to listen to a Vince, to an Arn Anderson, to a Fit Finlay, to any of these guys who literally helped pave the way for what the wrestling business is. And that's the only respect that I want to get.
Love it. So, Coach, when I met you this summer, when Tommy and I met you in the lobby of the hotel, we were hanging out for a little bit. First thing Tommy and I said to each other when you left was, I didn't realize how big Coach was.
Yeah.
Like you're a big guy. You're a good-looking guy. You can speak. Did you realize only a matter of time before you're more of an on-air personality?
I don't think I've really thought about it, but I knew Vince liked to have his backstage interviewers smaller, because the optical illusion of having guys appear bigger, that's part of the business. You want, little kids at home to go, man, that's a monster. Look at Kane, look at Undertaker. And I'm 6'3.5". I walk around, anywhere from 240 to 280, depending on the week. So there was a lot of things we had to do in order for me not to appear bigger. Me and The Rocks look eye to eye, if anybody wants to know that. And so I was always, if you look back at anything I did, I'm always positioned behind the talent. Well, one day we were doing an interview with a tag team, and then another tag team was going to come in and start a fight. And so the cameraman zoomed out a little bit too fast, and I had my legs completely spread, and you could see that. And I was behind all four guys to make them look bigger, because we had a lot of tag teams back then where I was bigger than all of them. I'm bigger than Edge and Christian. Me and the Dudley Boys, I'm bigger than Devon. So that's when I heard rumblings that Vince was pissed, which, wouldn't be the first time. So that's when, maybe a week or two after, I was in the gym, and it was actually Vince that came up to me, and he said, "Hey, listen, we had an idea. Like you just said, you can talk. We think you can really make the crowd care." And I don't think they had any designs on me being the heel that I turned into, but being able to get the crowd to really boo you. Look what Dom has done this year. He can't even, every time he does this, crowd goes bananas. I don't think people understand what a gift that is in the wrestling business. Look at what the New Day is doing now. They're beloved for over a decade, and they did it the right way. They did real life insulting to their brother. And now, same thing. They start to talk, the crowd goes absolutely bananas. The crowd wants to participate. I understand that. I have a really good mind, not only for this business, but for the sports business as a whole. And I think just now, after a quarter of a century on national TV, I'm starting to really understand what my strengths are and what I bring to the table. And I come from a world of helping, because I've been there on every step of the way. And that was a big part of my career, was making the decision that if I was going to do Raw or SmackDown, it was going to be as a heel. When I did all those skits with Eric Bischoff, people hated Bischoff, so they hated me. Me and him got along incredibly well. We do to this day. So it was a ton of fun. But Vince said, if you do this, you've got to be willing to get your ass kicked. You've got to be willing to go into the gym and train and really learn how to bump. And so some of my most proud moments is, my matches with Tajiri or Eugene, or the fact that I was in 2 Royal Rumbles. I love when, certain workers used to be like, "Oh, you suck," or "You're this." And I'll be like, the biggest moments are the Royal Rumble, they're WrestleMania. I was in 2. How many were you in? One of them, I spent 37 minutes inside the ring. Yeah, but you held onto the rope for like 4 or 5 minutes. Okay. What rope were you holding on to? And so to be looked at.
Coach, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
How many Rumbles was that?
2.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
And I was eliminated by 2 Hall of Famers, Ric Flair and The Big Show. So, when I look back at that, those moments, and I tell young people all the time, the moments are what nobody can take away from you. The moments are what you make of them. And so now when I watch wrestling today, I'm like, do these kids and ladies and men understand that you're trying to create moments, not only for yourself, but for the fan at home? So when they're talking about the shows, they go, "Hey, did you see what happened last night on Monday Night Raw?" And if everybody thought like that, there'd be a lot more moments. A lot of them just think, "Man, am I going to get TV time? Man, am I going to do this?" I always thought about, how can I make the crowd hate me even more? How can I make the crowd go, "God, I despise that guy"? And I can't even tell you how many people now come up to me all these years later and go, "Man, when I was 12, when I was 15, I hated you." And, whenever my music hit, the boos were music to my ears. So I worked really, really hard at becoming a character, and I'm very proud of that.
I remember watching you when I was 10, Coach, and I hated you, man.
No doubt, right?
Who trained you in the ring?
Wow. So this is kind of a tough one, because Chris Benoit trained me. He was the one that I worked with the most. He was incredibly giving of his time. We would go to house shows early in the afternoon, and we would train for 2 or 3 hours. And then when we were back in Stanford, Dr. Tom Pritchard, I would work with him, Dean Malenko a little bit. Shane McMahon would come down and roll around with us quite a bit, because he was always actively working on his matches. So I had a lot of guys, but it's when I talk about Chris, for me, my experience is he was beloved to me. He helped me in so many different ways, and I don't think he was a bad person. I think that he was really screwed up in the head, and it's hard to split those two things up, especially if you're on the side of the family that it happened to. And I completely understand that. But he was so giving of his time, and I think before that tragedy happened, he was maybe as respected a talent because of his work ethic. He was always in shape. He was always there, but he was one of those guys that I talked about that was never. If you're A plus as far as being over, he was never going to be more than a B, because he couldn't talk. A lot of the guys, they couldn't talk. They were uncomfortable on the mic, and so instead of trying to work on it, and I'm not saying that he didn't, but there's a lot of talent even to this day. Instead of going into the mirror and really putting the work in, they just don't do it. They just run away from it. It makes me feel uncomfortable. It's going to be something that people are going to look at me and not like it. And I could just have 5-star matches, and that's going to be good in their head. Well, that's not going to make you the millions of dollars. That's not going to get you into a main event at WrestleMania. That's not even going to get you on a WrestleMania card. You've got to be able to be what I like to call a 5-tool player. But as far as helping me, because you also got to remember too, I had been there for a few years, but yet if another talent would have come in and had to train from scratch, the rest of the boys would have been like, what the hell is going on? Right. How come that person is not in Ohio Valley, or they're not at a wrestling school, or whatever the case might be? So I had to learn really fast, but I also had to earn the respect. But once you climb through the ropes and you're physical, that completely changes how all the boys will look at you.
Anybody a hater for Coach when you're getting in the ring? Anyone not want you to do it?
Steven Regal was a guy that I didn't have a lot of haters, because also part of my other roles on the road helped guys. I was kind of the entertainment coordinator and helped guys get certain things, if you know what I mean. So they like me for different reasons. But as far as wrestling, a lot of guys, and you'll still see it now, it's so ridiculous. Oh, he took my spot. He took my TV time. Well, if you were so good, you shouldn't have let anybody take your TV time. And so I remember Regal, it wasn't a week off, but we had certain days, and then you do that week after Christmas like they're doing right now in the house shows. And so I grew a goatee because my hair, I wanted to shave it. It had stopped kind of growing the way I wanted it to grow. I didn't have time to go to the barber once a week or twice a week to have the fade. When you're on TV, you cannot afford to have your hair looking all crazy. So to be bald, I didn't want everything. So I grew a goatee. I showed up, and he went nuts. Only heels can wear facial hair or goatee. Go back in the history books. I want that shaved by next week. Well, the one thing I knew about guys like him is that he'll have forgotten about it in a week, because he's on to something else, and his mind was all crazy at the time too. And so I said, if I just stick it out, he's not going to whip my ass. And sure enough, the next week he was on to something else, and that kind of became my signature look. And I have not grown my hair out in over 23 years. I've had my goatee every day for the last 23 years. My action figures have the goatee and the bald head. So it's kind of become my signature look. And I can't even imagine, my hair right now would probably grow out like a chia pet. It's been so damn long. It'd be like, I don't know what yours would do, but like, So that was kind of the only haters. And then it's kind of a funny story, but we were in the meeting for the Royal Rumble, and Michael Hayes was the brainchild of putting together that match. And it's probably the hardest match of any to put together. Sure. You're talking about 60 minutes. You got to have spots. Sometimes there's 15 guys in the ring or more. So what you do is you meet in the afternoon. And for whatever reason, I became friendly with Hardcore Holly. Well, for some reason recently in my algorithms and on Instagram, a lot of the old videos of him doing Tough Enough have resurfaced. And I go, oh, I know that guy, where he would just beat the shit out of the young kids coming in. And it was kind of to weed them out, because you got to be incredibly tough to wrestle 4 days a week, to go through the training, all that stuff. So I remember we were sitting in, it was one of the two Royal Rumbles I was in, and I was leaning against the wall, so like my legs were straight out. You know what I mean? And so Michael Hayes was like, all right, number one, number two. He got to a certain point. He said, okay, anybody that is already released or already out of the match, you guys can leave the room. Well, I hadn't even come in the match yet on paper. Well, Hardcore had already come in and was gone. So Michael Hayes, he says that, and Hardcore is sitting right next to me. And I go, yeah, Hardcore, step. I kid you not. He stands up, and without missing a beat, he drop kicks. And this is how used he is to throwing a kick. He slaps his leg like it's a working kick.
Yeah.
And he kicks the point of his toe into the side of my thigh as hard as he can. It was so painful that at the rest of the afternoon, I was not sure if I would be able to participate that night because I could barely walk on my left leg. And he didn't play. And fast forward to him doing Tough Enough. He wasn't on the road because he was busy doing that. He was so regimented in his life that he would get up every 2 hours to eat, take supplements, things of that throughout the night.
Right.
So John Gaburick, or Big as people used to call him, he ran all of that stuff. So we were out at a bar in Stanford, per the usual, and it was like say it was like 1:18. It was not on the hour, okay? And he just picks up his phone, and he does this, and he goes, "Hey, somebody's on the phone for you." So I put it up and go, "Hey." He goes, "Who is this, mother?" And I don't even know who it is. "Who's this, mother?" He goes, "It's Bob Hawley. Why are you calling me at 1:08 or whatever the time was?" And I was like, "Oh no." And I look over at Big, and he's like, "Ah!" And he goes, "I am going to kill you. The next time I see you, I will kill you," because I'd thrown off his entire night. So fast forward, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, and at that time I was announcing on a show. It was a pay-per-view. So I always used to go up into the crowd to get away from everybody and work on my show notes. So I'm like sitting halfway up the lower bowl of the arena, and all of a sudden my lights just go out. There is a forearm over my eyes. There's and I can't breathe, and I get yanked out of my chair and raked over to the aisle, and I'm like, "Urgh!" and then I feel his breath in my ear. I told you that the next time I saw you, I was going to kill you. And this is your moment. This is your time. And I'm like, I couldn't breathe. And I was like, is he ever going to let me go? It was probably the only time in my life that I really thought I might die. And then he gets done. And he was not playing. There was no laughing. It was just like, don't do that. And it had been 3 months. Right. It had been but that's how intense Bob Hawley was. And in a certain way, I'm kind of that way when it comes to work sometimes. But man, you did not want to get on the wrong side of Bob. And he liked me. Right. Imagine if he didn't like me. But those are all right. There was very few stories. I was very lucky that I didn't get hazed a lot. I didn't get, not a lot of haters.
I know you got to get out of here in less than 10 minutes. Can we do like a rapid fire? I'll mention a guy from the locker room. Just tell me the first thing that comes to your head.
You got it.
Triple H.
Loves the business. Can't imagine him doing anything else.
Batista.
Very, very underrated. People don't know. Knocked me out unintentionally one time. Steubenville, Ohio. We were practicing a move. We were coming out after the intermission. He threw me up. We're in one of those old school locker rooms, cement beam going down. I went straight up. There's a good chance that the top skin of my head is still connected to that beam. But a good dude, and I'm so proud of where he's come and the fact that he's one of the ones I told you about, that when they told him you can't do movies, he bet on himself, and none of us thought he would get in some of the biggest movies in the world. So super proud of what he's done.
Booker T.
Tough, funny, talented, has evolved. I've always gotten along with him very, very well. And now with his school, he's paying it back, and he overachieved in marriage too, because his wife is incredibly, incredibly nice. And anybody that's ever met the two of them, What an incredible couple.
Nice. Steve Austin?
Love Steve. Still walked out on me one time. We were supposed to have a match on a pay-per-view, missed out on a payday. But I think he's a good dude. I think he believes in himself. And I wish more people believed in the business like he did and he does. And also, I think he's the most underrated host of shows on TV, maybe in the history of time. Not wrestling shows, but anything he has hosted, he's incredible at. So I've got a lot of respect for him.
John Cena?
To me, he's the best. And to me, being the best is way more than being in a ring. It's about utilizing your platform to the best of your ability, seeing him work with young kids, the Make-A-Wish. I traveled with him for a short bit. He's very, very serious about the business. But I saw him one time after 9 straight nights of drinking and paying the tab for everybody, because Ric Flair told him, if you're going to be the world champion, you got to act like a world champion. And that means paying for everybody because you're making more money than anybody. On the 10th night, he found out from Dean Malenko he was going to go 60 minutes with Shawn Michaels the next night on Monday Night Raw, put the beer down, and I watched him go 60 minutes the next night after 9 straight nights of drinking till 4 o'clock in the morning. To me, that will never be duplicated by my eyes ever again.
I hate the Cena haters, because if you look at the fact that this man was so exposed for so long and still was on top and getting a reaction, how is he not on your Mount Rushmore? I don't get it.
37%. I tell you, you want to talk about John Cena? I'm going to tell you 37%. And what's 37%? At his height, 37% of every dollar sold by WWEshop.com was a John Cena piece of merchandise. And if more people were invested in their own brand, and I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy to sell a t-shirt. It's not easy to sell a hat or to sell, but when he walked in the door, he was all business from noon until the show went off the air that night. He did not waste any time. And The Rock was the exact same way, which is why I don't think it's a coincidence that they're two of the guys that made the most money in the business, because they tried stuff. It didn't always work, but when it did work, man, they would take that to the moon. So I'll never hate on John Cena. One time I took a wrong turn. We were traveling together, and we showed up 2 minutes after the show started, and he was going to make me pay his fine, which he never did, but he was pissed that it was like in the mountains of Kentucky or somewhere, and you have to go all the way around, and we were late, and he hated being late. So that's one thing I remember.
Randy Orton.
As talented as anybody I've ever been around in my life. And he is a perfect example of you don't always have to be the person you were. I didn't always blame him when he was 19, 20 years old for doing all the stupid shit that he did. I just didn't like it. And he's grown up, and now he's respected in the locker room. By the time he just signed a new deal, 5 more years, he's going to be there, 25 years? To be at the highest level, to be in shape, to stay in shape for 25 years. I don't think people understand when you were working with your shirt off every week, there are no, hey, I'll take 2 weeks off and eat a bunch of ice cream. And he has evolved, but I'm so proud of him as a human being, just what I've seen from the outside looking in, because it's really, really hard to change when you're in that bubble for year after year, week after week, day after day. So, but he is unbelievably naturally talented in the ring.
Did you work with Bruce Pritchard at all?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
What are your thoughts on Bruce?
Yeah. I think Bruce has a really, really good wrestling mind. Bruce, like a lot of us, and I include myself in that, have different demons. But I think he's also navigated his career, and it's nothing short of a miracle that when it's very clear that TKO is getting rid of anybody connected to Vince, that Bruce has been able to keep that role this entire year. But super smart, one of the legendary characters in Brother Love in the history of the business, and he's always been good to me. And that's how I rate him, because I don't like people saying, oh, he's an asshole, but yet you've never met him or you've never had any interaction. You go, well, I see how he treated that person. I don't do that. He treated me good, so that's all I can say.
How'd you like working with Jim Ross?
People think we didn't like each other because, in the wrestling business, there's a lot of paranoia and there's a lot of jealousy. And I got put in a position, I think Vince just liked to see JR squirm, to be honest with you. And we did a lot of fun things though. He's always good to me, nice to me. I don't think he wanted to do any of those matches that we did, the country whipping match or any of that stuff. He didn't feel comfortable with it because in the real world, there's not a universe that exists that JR is going to kick my ass. But during those times, I would learn from him. He's the GOAT. He is the voice of wrestling. I think Michael Cole has gained on him in recent years. And I think he was born to call wrestling matches. And I think that's the best compliment that you can give him.
Last one. How'd you like working with Jerry Lawler?
He's the best. I wish I had more of the King in me. You know, the King cared about a couple of things. Making sure that every girlfriend he had was under the age of 30. And he was so naturally talented as a broadcaster. The ability to get in and out would allow JR to tell the stories. JR always wanted to set the tone, set the scene. He was so good with the descriptive words. And King was really good at go, oh, puppies. Like the one word stuff. And I think he was really underrated when it came to that aspect. But to be able to build up your character in the local scene in Memphis, the regional scene, and then build it into what he did. And he was great, man. He was with me, and he was never a hater. King didn't care enough to be a hater of anybody. He just loved getting that paycheck. He always did the house shows on the weekends because he loved to wrestle. And I think a lot more needs to be given credit to guys that continue to wrestle into their 50s and their 60s instead of hating on them. Say, listen, maybe they just like to do it. Most of them do need the money, but most of them just really enjoy getting that applause. And you've heard The Rock say it a million times. There is no substitute for this, you know, getting that. And I think King, he would never admit it. But the fact that he was doing house shows into his 70s kind of told you how much he loved it. So he was, man, he just liked to have a good time. And you would never see him, hardly, until about 6 o'clock. He had that unbelievable knack. If we were not around, it's like, where's Coach at? Or where's this guy? Are these guys playing cards? Nobody cared what King did. He could hang out at the hotel all afternoon. It didn't even matter because he was so valued in that spot with JR. They're like, hey, as long as you keep delivering, we're going to leave you alone.
Coach, plug your stuff.
We got a lot going on right now as far as wrestling business. You see behind me, behind the turnbuckle. It's a brand that's really expanding. We've got a show Monday nights at 10 o'clock right after Raw, whenever that's going to end now for Netflix. But we also do interviews. I do a show with Vince Russo called The Coach and Bro Show. That is also all that's on the same YouTube page. We're getting ready to announce these shows will be on a bigger platform starting very soon. Excited about that. And then we have a sports betting brand, Driving the Line. It's every day at 10 a.m. Eastern time, also on YouTube, but also we're on Amazon Prime, we're on DirecTV, YouTube TV, and that is 7 days a week. We're live 6 days a week, on demand on Saturdays. So heavy in the world of sports betting and wrestling, and then I do PFL and the PGA Tour. So with all of that, I'm very, very busy, but I'm very grateful that as the media business has evolved, we've been able to evolve with it. And it's not just me. I've got a team. I've got a lot of good people around me, and we're going to see where we go. I feel like I have about 25 good years left, and I want to use them to do good things with good people and for good people. That's all I care about. I don't need any me stuff anymore. It's got to be about growing the brands and doing it the right way and having fun doing it. Because the one thing I've realized through my wrestling career, through my family, is that we have no idea how long we're going to be able to do this stuff, whether it's not even just staying alive, but being able to be in this business and do this content and have people want to watch it or listen to it or be able to do, you know, you and I, we've taken a few months to make this happen, but this is very enjoyable for me. And to me, that's what life's all about. And I've never understood the whole, hey, I'm here or you're here. We're all just breathing human beings that like the wrestling business or like sports. And that's all we try to do. And that's all I try to do every single day. So thank you for having me on your show. And I look forward to the next convention that you and I will butt heads at.